In 1980, Africa's share in the world trade was 4%. 40 years later in 2020, the global environment has changed. The population has increased, the needs have increased, trade has increased, and opportunities have increased. Paradoxically, Africa's share in this new global trading environment has fallen to just 2%. A bitter observation that leaves interrogations about the future prospects of African trade. In this context, the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, has since 2017 raised this issue at the heart of its annual lecture, called the BABACAR NDIAYE, in tribute to the founding role that the late Dr. BABACAR NDIAYE played in the creation of Afreximbank. The fourth edition of the BABACAR NDIAYE lecture was held virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with a forward-looking view on the future of intra-African trade in the light of recent major developments in the world economy. This is happening at the eve of the entry into the force of the African Continental Free Trade Area in January 2021. Hence the theme, Africa and the Remaking of the New World Order.
The BABACAR NDIAYE lecture is one of the flagship events at Afreximbank. It's a series that was inaugurated in 2017 in honor of a really great man who left an indelible mark and was fundamental to the establishment of this great institution we call the African Export-Import Bank today. We honor his life with this event, the life he lived and the causes for which he fought.
Professor Benedict Oromo, President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of Afreximbank, gave welcome remarks to the fourth edition of the NDIAYE lecture.
The BABACAR NDIAYE lecture was established 4 years ago to honor Dr. NDIAYE's memory and sustain his vision of using strong continental institutions as instruments for delivering Africa's development and integration. Afreximbank was inspired by his vision and the relevance of the institutions he helped create.
Ms. Aruma Ote, former colleague of the late Dr. BABACAR NDIAYE, during his time as president of the African Development Bank from May 1985 to August 1995, gave a moving and insightful tribute about Dr. NDIAYE's life as her mentor.
I was stunned and have not forgotten that first meeting because he exhibited what I consider unique attributes associated with extraordinary leadership. He was passionate about Africa. He listened. He had empathy. He shared such enormous wisdom with me in a very short time. I am fortunate that he became a lifelong mentor. I learned a lot from him. He believed in me way before I believed in myself. There was no job that I competed for or role that I accepted without seeking his advice. His perspectives were always invaluable. He was a godly man. He was caring and generous to all who encountered him. Everywhere he went, Canada, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Japan, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States, to name a few countries, people flocked around him, perhaps to learn from his nuggets of wisdom, perhaps to be inspired. I marveled at how one individual could have so much love to give any day and anywhere. As a leader, I try my best to live by the tenets that he taught me through his life and his guidance. Dr. BABACAR NDIAYE was a fine professional and had great pride in his work. To him, he was always building a beautiful mosque or cathedral, not just laying bricks. He had great pride in Africa and its people. He was loved inside and outside of Africa and got many awards and recognitions in every African country and globally. He lived by the saying, "United we stand," and the African proverb, "To go far, we must go together."
She also shared his vision of Africa as an economic powerhouse.
The theme you selected for this year's lecture, Africa and the Remaking of the New World Order, is one that fits the extraordinary times that society faces. I hope that this year's lecture will indeed be a call to action for each one of us. I hope it will inspire each one of us to emulate Dr. BABACAR NDIAYE and contribute to turning Africa into an economic powerhouse. His legacy lives on, even as his soul continues to rest in eternal peace.
Professor Benedict Oroma, president of Afreximbank, underlined the visionary spirit of Dr. BABACAR NDIAYE and his development impact. He firmly believed in African trade at an early stage and built many institutions, including Afreximbank.
Afreximbank stands today as an indisputable evidence of Dr. Ndiaye's foresight. Created in response to the devastating impact of the sovereign debt crisis of the 1980s on African economies, Afreximbank has become the African crisis management institution par excellence. Dr. Ndiaye lived ahead of his time. He was Africa's Nostradamus, the man who saw tomorrow. Is there anyone that distinguished, ladies and gentlemen, why his memory must be kept alive, especially as Africa charts a course towards true economic independence?
This lecture was seen as a call to action in these hectic times of COVID-19 and tectonic changes.
These tectonic shifts and dramatic changes appear to be in the verge of disrupting the old world order, thereby fostering global tensions.
The choice of the main theme, Africa and the remaking of the New World Order, reflected these developments at the global level. Professor Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow, Asia Research Institute and Founding Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore, in his keynote predicted a shift in economic power from the West to Asia in the first half of the 21st century, with the second half moving into the Afro-Asian century.
In the first half of the 21st century, we'll be moving into the Asian century. But in the second half of the 21st century, we'll be moving into the Afro-Asian century.
He insisted that Africa's demographic will determine future relationships with Europe and explained how education is essential in reaching a phenomenal economic growth.
Demographics matter. Hence, the future relations between Africa and Europe will be determined by demographics. In 1980, the EU's combined population, 379 million, was nearly double that of Africa's in 1950. Double. Today, Africa's population, 1.3 billion in 2018, is double that of the European Union in 2018. And by 2100, Africa's population is projected to be almost 10 times larger than Europe's. 4.5 billion versus 493 million. So in 2100, Africa's population will probably be about the same as Asia's. And this is why I'm glad that when President Obasanjo also delivered this lecture, he said education is key.
Professor Mahbubani mainstreamed the culture of MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty, which helped achieve successful demographic transitions in China. Meritocracy will play a big role in the process of African Renaissance and the return of the continent to the global center stage.
First, on meritocracy, the biggest asset that Africa has is not its vast natural resources or its forests. Africa will soon have the world's largest collection of young minds.
Pragmatism, which emphasizes the adoption of the development models and solutions with a proven track record, enabled China to overtake the US as the largest economy in the world in purchasing power, parity terms, after a successful demographic transition.
The simple answer is pragmatism.
He highlighted that the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation, a great example of pragmatism, is critical for the economic transformation of the continent.
Africa has been very wise in adopting the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in 2018.
Professor Mabubani exhorted future generations of Africans to aspire to be honest. For in his view, corruption has been the single most important impediment to development over the years.
Thou shalt acknowledge that corruption is the single most important cause for failures in development.
After thanking the participants and speakers for their exceptional contribution in the 4th edition of the Ndyaye Lecture, in his closing remarks, Dr. Fofak, Chief Economist at the Afreximbank, observed that the rise of Africa in the second half of the 21st century will take the world back to the beginning of history, stressing the role played by Africa as the cradle of civilization.
For decades, we've been the geopolitical bridge between the West and the East. Africa is expected to become a fully integrated, prosperous, and dynamic force in the international arena by 2063, in the second half of the century. In essence, the second half of the 21st century will be one of the most exciting moments in that long trajectory of human history. We'll be returned to the beginning of history. We are returning to the beginning of history, which all begins with Africa.
The poet D.K. Chukwumerije gave a rousing rendition of African history, highlighting the exceptional contribution of Africa to the world and paying homage to the systematically organized civilization of Africa's past. In his poem titled, "Like This We Find Our Memory," he stressed the importance of history in the survival of civilization and invited Africans to treasure and preserve their history.
The ways we have been taught since then to tell our own history has tried to erase our memory of the fact that Africa was not born on its knees. This present of dysfunctional states and a permanent third world status, this present is not an accurate reflection of our past. This gives me hope. For the apple can never fall far from the tree. You see, the snake will always give birth to something that is long. This gives me hope that one day a careless shovel, hidden perhaps in the works of Sheikh Anta Diop or the novels of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in the poetry of Lebo Mashile or the plays of Wole Soyinka, in the pottery of Ladi Kwali or the music of Makeba, that one day a careless shovel will break the ground of this our current amnesia and cause us to remember whose children we are. Cause us to remember that in our African hearts, we carry the capacity to be as relevant to the construction of the new world as we were to the old one. Cause us to remember that in our African souls, we carry still and always the ability to rise.